and gentlemen. It's an honor to be in the Netherlands. My name is Talia Sanhewe. I've come all the way from Cape Town, South Africa, to join you here tonight to share my personal story. Now, my personal story is really about finding what you love. It's that signature thing that you do with the most amount of ease that when you do it, people often say to you, my goodness, you should really open a bakery, you should really get into television, or alternatively, you should discover your talent and become an artist. And so what I wanted to do tonight is just share a few anecdotal stories from my life, and hopefully you'll look at your own life and connect the dots. What I've found in my life is when I've looked back, suddenly the very thing that I was meant to do was staring me right in the face. In fact, the very thing that I was meant to do with my life was just under my nose. So my story begins in Zimbabwe. I was born in Zimbabwe, in Harare, and as a young girl of about 2 years old, my family moved to the United Kingdom, and that's where I grew up, and my dad is sitting here, and that's where I grew up and also gained the English accent that I'm proud to display to you tonight. And it was in England, actually, that the real genesis of my passion for communication and storytelling began. So there I was, a child of all of 4 years old. And as little children are, especially if you have girls, you want to encourage them to become ballerinas. So my parents enrolled me in a ballet school in London, and there I was in my pink tutu, ready to do battle with the world. I was informed by my ballet teacher that we were going to have special guests attending the class. I had no idea who was coming to school. Little did I know that there was a camera crew arriving at school that day from none other than the BBC. And they were there at my school to show the world what arts and creativity could do in my community. So there I was, in my pink tutu, standing there, doing pliés on the sidebar, and there was a journalist interviewing me about my role as a mini ballerina. But what was quite interesting about that experience was that that was my first encounter with cameras. Cameras that I soon grew to love, and cameras that would soon define my life from then as a 4-year-old to today as a 31-year-old woman. There was another interesting story that happened when I was 6 years old. My father had the best job in the world. And I say that with great emphasis because as a 6-year-old child, if your parents worked in a toy store, your father had the best job in the world. So my dad worked at Hamleys. Now, for those of you who know, Hamleys, in my world, is the largest toy store in Europe, but I stand to be corrected. So on this particular day, my dad, along with a colleague, was unpacking some toys, and one of them happened to be a little toy radio with a microphone. So there I was, my 6-year-old self. I grabbed this microphone, I put it to my mouth, and I started talking and singing and doing the whole thing. And one of my dad's colleagues actually said to him, "You know what, Ralph? Your daughter's got talent." That was before the TV show existed. And then he said to me, you should actually consider your daughter entering her into maybe speaking or music or singing or something along those lines. But then it was only going to be 15 years later. I traveled from cold, snowy, grey England to sunny, bright South Africa, where I started to connect the dots. I joined the University of Cape Town, where I enrolled as an undergraduate student for a BA Film and Media degree. I wasn't too sure what I was going to study, actually. Ironically, I wanted to become an optometrist. I was told that optometrists had their own businesses, but I spent at least about 2-3 days with an optometrist and felt that I was spending way too much time talking to the clients and very little time actually dispensing with the contact lenses. Soon after that, I then discovered this world of media. I enrolled for this BA degree, and it was an incident in my first week of university that really set the tone for the rest of my life. There I was, freshman, new, didn't know anything much, and someone handed me a flyer. They said to me, "Talia, you've got to grab this." So I grabbed this flyer, and in my hand was an invitation to UCT Radio. It was our campus radio station at the time. So there I was, and I was intrigued by what was written on this flyer. Join UCT Radio, your campus radio station. And there I was, and I made my way through to the radio station where I was handed another piece of paper. It was a news bulletin, the very first news bulletin that I had ever received in my entire life. I was told at that moment that this was my audition. And there I had to sit and stand in front of the microphone when the red light was about to go on. It was green, and someone's hands went up. They counted down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action, camera 1. And in that moment, I had to open my mouth. I was absolutely nervous. My hands literally were clutching the side of that paper, white with fear and anticipation, as well as trepidation. But I can describe something that happened, and it really, literally set the course for the rest of my life. In that moment, when I opened my mouth to speak into that microphone, it was as if I had literally been connected to my very purpose. It was as if the moment I opened my mouth and I spoke those words into that microphone, amplified to an audience unseen, it was as if I had found the very thing I was meant to do with my life. I decided then and there, whether I did it as a hobby or whether I did it as a living, I was going to do this very thing they called broadcasting. And it was then, as a freshman student, that I decided to take my dreams and ideas to the next level. So here I find myself in Europe, here in Breda, but I've always, I think, had a very global perspective about the world in which I live. Yes, I currently live in the southern tip of Africa, very proud to live in Cape Town, but I wanted to know, now that I had found this thing, this sort of intangible talent that was literally under my nose, was I really as good as I thought I was? And to answer that question, I realized that I needed to test my ability to speak and communicate with the very best in the world. I'm slightly precocious, as I'm sure you might have imagined, and I hopped onto the internet and I went online and discovered that the BBC World Service offered some work and internship experiences in London. And it was there, to my absolute surprise, after sending an email to info@, and you know when you send an email to info@, you have no idea where it's going, I got a wonderful reply back saying, the BBC would like to invite you to London to come and participate in this prestigious work experience. So there I was, packed my bags, and off I went after having done a great stint at the Oprah Magazine in Cape Town. And there I was with journalists from all over the world. I had a boss who was from Canada, and he was quite exacting, and he put me through my paces. But none so great as the day in December, I think it was early 2000s, when the news wires went crazy. Now, some of you may remember this, but for those of you who don't, I'm going to do a quick refresher course. So it was a day when the US Armed Forces had found a certain man in a hole that they had been looking for a while. His name would be Saddam Hussein. I was told by my Canadian boss at the time, Talia, Saddam Hussein has been found right now. You need to run down to the Arab News Service immediately and get a translation. And this, my dear, is going to be your biggest moment in broadcasting. I was flabbergasted. What did this mean? I ran down to the Arab Broadcasting Service. I got it translated. And then he told me that in that very moment, I was going to read that broadcast live on the BBC. And it was absolutely incredible. I read it live on the BBC as a reenactment of Saddam Hussein being found in the hole. And again, that same intrinsic, wonderful moment I felt when I was at university happened again, but now I was in London, amplified on a global scale. I realized yet again that this thing, this idea of speech, this idea of communication, this essence of talking was something that I had loved, and it was this global element of it was something that I was absolutely addicted to. So much so that I hopped on board and hopped overseas to America, where I studied at the University of California, Los Angeles, of course, the famed university known for kicking out Steven Spielberg. And it was there that I completed my degree in film and television at the prestigious school, and subsequently, on returning back to South Africa, hopped on over to CNN International. Again, not too sure whether I was really that good or whether it was just a fluke. My time at CNN International was absolutely phenomenal, and then that led me to my next stop. And at this point in the story, I want to stop and just almost pause and reflect that when you're about to pursue what you love, when you're about to pursue the dream in your heart, that idea, that almost whimsical desire to do something different, that idea that sort of takes you from average to extraordinary, from ordinary to extraordinary, it does require that you take certain risks. It requires that you think out of the boat. It requires that you step out in faith. And most importantly, it requires that you swim upstream. I've always been someone that my friends have often referred to as having delayed reaction. It's almost like I see an impossible situation. I don't almost compute the impossibility, but it's almost after the event I realize that it was near impossible, but the whole idea of belief almost engulfs the impossibility before me. It was at this time that I realized that my life in Europe was wonderful, but Africa was where I wanted to be. I wanted to come back to Africa, to South Africa specifically, and use the skills and the talent that I had gained in newsrooms right across Europe to come home and tell the African story. I had an opportunity to work with CNBC Africa, which at that stage was the continent's first pan-African broadcaster, broadcasting business news right across the continent. And this was the defining opportunity, and it was really a significant moment in my career because it was through CNBC Africa that I found myself in New York. After a brief interview and working as a journalist for CNBC Africa, I was in the job all of 7 months. I was in New York on a business trip. And it was this business trip that really defined what it means to be maverick, what it means to be a risk taker, and most importantly, what it means to believe in yourself. I was in New York, and it was the opportunity to be at the mothership. I was at 30 Rock, some of you may know that, and of course the comedy that accompanies that as well, and also went to our headquarters in New Jersey. I had walked around the studios absolutely in awe of what I had seen. A studio grander than my imaginations. You can imagine this young girl from Zimbabwe who had grown up in the United Kingdom via the UK and subsequently in South Africa was now in New York. And there was a wonderful young man, not so young, I suppose. He was in his mid-40s, but that's young to me. And he was assigned to take me around the studio. We looked at all the camera equipment. We looked at all the newsrooms. And it just kind of filled my heart with joy. And, of course, I was wearing high heels, and my feet were killing me. So I asked him, "Can I please sit in your office? I'm exhausted." I sat in his office, and he said, "No problem, Talia. I'm just going to hop on over and get you a cup of coffee." So I'm sitting in his office, and I casually turned to my left, and it was there that I saw a glistening glass cabinet. I had never seen anything more spectacular in my life, and it was really what was inside the cabinet that intrigued me most than the cabinet itself. In it, I saw Emmy Awards, Academy Awards. I had never seen so many in my entire life, and they were literally a few meters from me. When he came back in with his piping hot coffee, I couldn't help myself. I said to him, "I'm sorry, but how did you win these awards? I mean, this is phenomenal." He said to me, "Talia, do you think the Academy simply bestowed these awards upon me because I'm great?" I sort of stepped back and I thought, well, yes, that's what I thought happened. He said, "No, not at all. What happens often is you want to apply to win an Emmy, to win an Oscar, you literally fill out a form. You submit the money, the US dollars that's required, and you submit your work." It took me by surprise that something so hallowed, so regal, so up there was so accessible. And he said something to me that I've never forgotten. He said, "Talia, the thing in life is that so many of us disqualify ourselves from the race because of what's in our minds. We think that we are not entitled to enter the race because we think there's someone smarter, brighter, more beautiful, more talented than we are. The irony is in life is that all you need to do is apply, and that's half the battle." I subsequently went back to Cape Town, spoke to my cameraman, and together we put together a documentary. We submitted it for a competition in Cape Town, and we won. We won the award. But I was still a little bit curious. Could we win an Emmy? So we submitted the particular documentary into the International Emmys, and to my absolute surprise, the gentleman that I met in New York was absolutely correct. Not only did the Emmy find my documentary intriguing, they invited me to participate as a jury judge in the International Emmys a few years back. And it was then that I realized the unique thing about life. When you find what you love and you want to run with it, you need to be a risk taker. You need to be a maverick. You need to think outside of the box, and sometimes people might even call you crazy. But no matter where you come from, be it Beijing, Breda, Zimbabwe, Harare, or London, those who make the best difference in life are those who take the greatest risks. They find what they love and they run with it against all odds to reach the end and the goal of their lives. Thank you so much.